And we are back here on the GSMC football podcast. And for the third part of the show, we are now going to talk about the Buccaneers and what their future is after their 31-23 playoff loss to the Lions. So I want to get into the Todd Bowles thing because that's been something that's been talked about a lot over the last couple of days now since they, since they lost to the Lions. So they didn't use their last timeout. And so after the Baker Mayfield interception, and I was kind of just like reading up on it, I was looking at a New York Post article. So the Lions had the ball at the Buccaneers 29 with 1:33 left in the fourth quarter. And this is after, Baker throws the pick that basically, which, I was like, yeah, the game's over now. And, we see, teams not using their last timeouts. But yeah, so there was 1:33 left in the game. Tampa had one timeout remaining. They could probably, they would at least maybe get the Lions to a fourth down, and they'd have to kick a field goal. Now, for me, one thing I would say is the Bucs would also have to stop the Lions, and I felt like the Bucs weren't going to be able to do that. But again, that's just my opinion. But anyway, so yeah, they had one timeout remaining, and have the fourth down play with about 7 seconds remaining. Should each play take no more than 2 seconds? That's what the New York Post article was saying. So the third kneel down came with 36 seconds left in the game. Goff was kneeling with time left on the clock. So it wasn't like the Lions were letting the clock wind down and then they would take another kneel down as like the play clock's about to expire. They were still kneeling. They were kneeling with the time still left, and Bowles was not using the timeout. So they just let it go all the way down. So people were saying it's possible it's possible the line snapped earlier in the clock to react to the Buccaneers not using the timeout, but Bowles dismissed any aspect of chivalry among coaches. He said it's not a gentleman's agreement. He just said basically Bowles was saying, this is what he said, no point in prolonging the obvious. So he basically saying the Bucs had no chance because then the Lions would have kicked the field goal and they would have been down by 11. But then again, it's like, what if they miss it? Then you get the ball back. But yeah, that's something people have talked about with Dan Campbell is clock management. Is again, you're kneeing the ball down, and there's still time on the clock. They have that timeout, but I guess the Lions figured they weren't going to do it. But yeah, I mean, it just shows you're kind of just waving the white flag because Bowles did also say we competed for 60 minutes. Well, maybe you only competed for most of the game, but then you kind of just gave up at the end. Because again, what if like people are talking about on TV everywhere? What if they block the field goal? It doesn't make sense. You play to the end, and basically people are saying that the Bucs didn't play to the end. That Bowles kind of just gave up because he figured, well, it's a chip shot field goal, and they'd be down by 11, and it really wouldn't matter. But again, you just never know. So you could at least take the chance and just call the timeout, let them kick the field goal, and see if they can make it. So, I agree with that. I'll be honest, I really didn't take any notice of this watching the game. I kind of just was like, yeah, this game's over. But, I really did not take notice of the fact that the Lions just were not letting the play clock wind all the way down and then take a knee. They were, doing it with time still left on the clock. So, but I mean, listen, I get it. I mean, you're down 11 and there'd be really no time left. I mean, yeah, it'd be impossible, but you never know. If they block the field goal, what if the Bucs block the field goal and run it back? Like, you just never know. You should take that chance. But yeah, it was a sad ending to their season. I knew it was going to be tough for them. The Lions were the better team. I mean, the Lions beat them this year, and they really didn't have Jahmyr Gibbs. Well, they didn't have Jahmyr Gibbs in that game, and they didn't have David Montgomery. He got hurt in the game. Craig Reynolds was their leading rusher, and he actually ended up scoring a touchdown in the playoff game on Sunday on 4th and 1. So, yeah, the Lions were the better team, but you know what? The Bucs, they showed up, at least offensively. And on defense they did get some stops during the game, but ultimately the Lions were the better team. And listen, they have a lot of question marks going into the off season because of the fact that they got a decent amount of free agents. And I did touch upon this, but I want to just go through the list of players. So Mike Evans is a free agent. Baker Mayfield is a free agent. Devin White is a free agent. Levante David. They're two inside linebackers. They're free agents. William Goldston on the defensive line. Greg Gaines on the defensive line. Matt Filer, the guard. Antoine Winfield Jr., their Pro Bowler safety. And then some other free agents as well that aren't really, I wouldn't say are massive. But those are like the big... Chase McLaughlin, also a free agent, their kicker. You had Chase Edmonds, the backup running back. Ryan Neal, strong safety. And some other players as well. But those are the big names right there. Mike Evans, Devin White, Levante David, Baker Mayfield, Antoine Winfield Jr. You're not going to be able to bring all those free agents back. I think for me personally, you start off by bringing back Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans because they were really good together this year. Mike Evans has had a 1,000-yard season every year he's been in the league. And, the touchdown-wise last year, it was kind of a down year, but the Bucs offense had a down year. But, again, there's Tom Brady's last year. How long was Brady going to play? Eventually he was going to have to hang it up. Now, I think if you point to the offensive line, if the offensive line was better last year, I think the Bucs offense would have been better, but because Brady had to get rid of the ball so quickly. But this year was a bounce back season for Mike Evans, if you want to call 2022 a down year, even though again he had over 1,000 yards. But I was very happy with how Baker performed this year. Played well in the playoff game against the Eagles, but I think it's also because the Eagles just were awful to finish off the year. Their defense was one of the worst defenses in the league. But again, Baker played well there. He played well against the Lions too. But again, the Lions were the better team. And next year, and especially with all these free agents, if you're not going to be, and a lot of these guys, they were on that Super Bowl team. Levante David, Winfield Jr., Devin White, they were on that Super Bowl team. So you might not see them back. Mike Evans, we'll see. The Bucs, they weren't able to come to an agreement on a contract, before the season started. But, I don't know. It's kind of hard to see Mike Evans playing somewhere else other than Tampa. If he goes to if he goes to the Giants, that would be awesome. But I think, and Baker Mayfield even said it. He's like, that he would love to be back, but he'd also like, them to bring back Mike Evans and he said he's a stud. And he absolutely is. Mike Evans is a future Hall of Famer. With the kind of career that he's had. He's got a career that a lot of people don't really talk about. Because he's been in Tampa for so long, and the quarterback changes. Listen, he played with Mike Glennon, he played with Ryan Fitzpatrick, and obviously played with Jameis for a while, and then he got finally got what he deserved, a consistency at the quarterback position for a little bit, and that was Tom Brady. And what did they do their first year? They won a Super Bowl. And now they bring in Baker, and listen, Baker Mayfield was brought in to compete with Kyle Trask to be the starting quarterback, and Baker just took that job by the horns, and he deserved it. And he played well this year. Was, I think, statistically his best season as a starting quarterback, and yeah, it was a rough couple of years for him. It really was. The Browns are like, we're going to move off of you, get Deshaun Watson. Baker goes to Carolina, and that doesn't work out. Then the Rams picked him up because they needed a quarterback, and, he had that Thursday night comeback where he just, he learning the playbook on the fly. And then he finds a home in Tampa, and I hope this is his new home moving forward. And, the Bucs can continue to build up this team. And they can, this division is still... It's going to be better next year, but it's still winnable. But the competition is going to be it's going to be more competitive next year. Because you figure the Saints are going to be better. The Falcons, if they bring in one of these head coaches that are available and they get the right quarterback, and we'll see what the Panthers do. The Panthers actually, they hired from within. They promoted someone to be their GM. I was going to mention that in the first segment, but I didn't do that. So yeah, they hired Dan Morgan as their general manager. Yeah, so this was a staying in house choice. But yeah, I mean, you kind of figured maybe the Panthers would go outside and maybe bring somebody else in, bring a different perspective. But no, they hired from within. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I mean, for the Bucs, the division is going to be competitive next year, more competitive, but it's going to be winnable. It's still going to be winnable, in my opinion. But that also depends on what they do, because if you lose some of these key pieces on defense, that's a problem. That's a problem. But we'll just have to wait and see. I mean, again, I'm happy with how the season went for them, that they got to this point. I mean, they finished with a better record this year than they did last year by one game. And listen, I said early on in the season, I was like, this is the team I want to see win it. Then at certain points, it looked like it was going to be the Falcons or the Saints, especially because the Bucs were 4-7. It looked like this is it for them. But then they were able to put it together, and at the end of the season, although there was the hiccup with the Saints in Week 17 where they just, the Saints dominated that game. But they were able to win the next game, although that was a sweat too, only winning 9-0 to the Panthers. They, win a playoff game, and then they, they compete with the Lions. And, we'll see now next year, who ends up coming back. But I think they should start by bringing back Baker Mayfield, bring back Mike Evans, and then you try to maybe bring back at least one of the guys on defense. We'll see. Because I know Levante David, he's been there forever. I think Antoine Winfield Jr. maybe that's maybe someone you prioritize amongst the defensive players to bring back. But we'll see. But that division is going to be better next year, you figure. Because if they bring in the Falcons, bring in Belichick or Vrabel or Harbaugh, yeah, the Falcons are going to, and they get the quarterback. I mean, that you look at that team as probably being the best team in the division. So, the Falcons have a good roster. The Saints have a good roster. It's just, there's some things they need to improve on. The Saints' consistency was the issue for them. I mean, the last couple of games of the season, they beat Tampa and then they destroyed the Falcons. It's like, where was that all year? But, again, we'll see what happens in 2024. But, let me know what you guys think about the Bucs season. Again, for me, I'm happy Baker Mayfield, at least for the moment, has found a new home. And I hope this is his home, for the rest of his career, because I think he deserves it from what he's had to go through. And he's changed. You could tell, he's changed, because obviously when he first came into the league, everyone kind of looked at him as like the next Johnny Manziel with the attitude and things like that. But I think what he's gone through is kind of brought him back to reality. He's humbled him, and now we'll see what happens going forward. I'm looking forward to this being his home, and hopefully they bring back Mike Evans and they bring back some of these other guys as well. And they go out there and they compete for the division next year, So, that's really my thoughts on this topic. But again, let me know what you guys think in the comments. So when we come back from our final break of the show, we will talk about the other playoff team that was the last playoff team that was eliminated, the Buffalo Bills, and what's next for them going into the 2024 season. So, for one final time today, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.